claim is that state is present as a fact, and as a Muslim, it's command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all aspects of your life. You implement those commands all aspects of your life, including state. But our claim is that modern state as an institution is intimately linked with capitalism and obviously democracy, which is capitalist democracy. People call it constitutional democracy. And imperialism, which is, you can't have capitalism without imperialism. Imperialism is part and parcel of capitalism, and it's dynamic. So what you need to do is, so inherently, modern state is incapable of subserving itself to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it is basically created to subserve the command of the capital. So if you try to implement, if you are able to, like if you live in a Muslim majority and you win election, for example, try to implement the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you won't be able to, unless you deconstruct this state. And sooner or later, the state will distort the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you will be implementing it partially, or the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala itself will become an instrument of this state. As happened with many Gulf states which implement Sharia partially and selectively, or in Turkey, for example, or in Egypt when Islamists came to power. So what you need to do is to deconstruct this state. And the process for that is initially to build a state within a state at micro level. And after a long struggle, this state will, so this, if the struggle is successful, this state will become powerful. And eventually this state will be overthrown totally and deconstructed, and a new state will be erected, which is an Islamic state. That state will accept the implementation of and be a vehicle of the implementation of the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the state would be a totally different from a capitalist state. That's the state we call Islamic state. And that's what happens. So, for example, that's what happened in Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in Mecca, there was a state, the Meccan state. It had its own parliament, Darun Nadwa. It had its own ministries and its own offices, which were distributed among different tribes of Quraysh, different clans of Quraysh, Bani Hashim, Bani Abdiddar, Bani Makhzum, and all those. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't participate. He refused to participate in and part of this state. They offered him through Abu Talib several times. What he did is he built his own state within a state. And it has its different manifestation and micro institutions, different organizations. For example, Darul Arqam was one of them. Dar ibn Sayyid was the other one of them, and there was part of this organization which was in Habasha, for example, and the others were spread around different tribes of Arabia. The people who became Muslim, and the Prophet ﷺ told them to go back to their tribes and wait for his orders. And obviously, the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina, and then he built his Mubarak state, Dawlat al-Islam, in Medina al-Munawwara. And from that state, whose center was Masjid al-Nabi and the Masjid of Quba, Islam spread around the world. So where did we start from?